that that's a full solution.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I'm very happy to take a call on the Taxation Annual Rates, Returns, Filing and Remedial Matters Bill, and we're on Part 5, dealing with, among other things, changes to the KiwiSaver Act of 2006. And I have to say I'm surprised to be here debating a bill or a measure put forward by the National Government to increase the KiwiSaver contributions to 3%. Now, this is a special moment for me because one of the very first speeches I gave in this House, I think it might have even been before my maiden speech, was opposing the National Government, the newly elected National Government's decision to cut KiwiSaver contributions from 4% to 2%. And I said at the time, and this was, I'd only just arrived here, that I thought that was a very short-sighted measure, that I thought that 4% probably wasn't actually enough. And here we are. I'm very pleased that they're increasing the contributions to 3%. In fact, I think they should go back to the 4% and potentially go higher than that. So I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to talk about this decision. I think moving back to 3% is a very sensible move. I think it was an unwise decision to drop the contribution in the first place. I'm not entirely sure what the motivation behind the National Government proposing that at the time was, given that the uptake of KiwiSaver was so high. I think KiwiSaver, when it was first created in 2006, exceeded the then Labor government's expectations many-fold. I don't think that they were possibly anticipating that so many people would sign up for KiwiSaver. It was hugely popular, and I remember, I think, just continually watching Michael Cullen ticking off milestones in the KiwiSaver scheme, and I think that was really fantastic. I think it was therefore confusing when the incoming National Government decided to cut it in half without any real justification for doing so, because it was clear that 4% didn't provide a barrier to people wanting to sign up for KiwiSaver. They were already signing up for KiwiSaver in large numbers at 4%, and so the argument that more people would sign up for it if we dropped the contribution rate to 2% was in fact a little bit of a folly. And so I'm very pleased to see that it's going up to 3% now. There's another interesting aspect to this, which is we want to encourage retirement savings generally. And dropping the KiwiSaver contribution to 4%, from 4% to 2%, created some inequities in the system where government had previously provided other superannuation schemes that were more generous than KiwiSaver, than 2%, but less generous than the 4%. So, for example, I was, when I was a public sector employee, a member of the state sector retirement savings scheme, and that has a contribution rate of 3%. Now, when KiwiSaver was introduced, future public servants were prevented from signing up to be members of that scheme on the basis that actually everyone could sign up for KiwiSaver. It was more generous, bigger contribution, and therefore they were better off doing that. When the government cut that to 2%, it created some real unfairness, because it meant that newer people signing up to be public servants, and we want people to sign up to work in the public service and to serve New Zealanders, it meant that they were being penalised and they were being disadvantaged because they could no longer get the 3% employer contribution that they might have been able to get previously before KiwiSaver was introduced and before the membership to the state sector retirement savings scheme was cut off. So this bill now brings KiwiSaver back up to that rate. So I think that's very good, and it will, I'm sure, be welcomed by the people who would otherwise have missed out on that extra 1% employer contribution. There is an interesting section in here around non-deduction notices, and I haven't had a chance to study this in great detail with reference back to the Principal Act, and of course when you're reading an amendment bill without reference to the Principal Act, sometimes things aren't always as clear as they might otherwise be. But by my reading of this matter, people can, whenever they want to, issue a non-deduction notice to their employer and stop their KiwiSaver contributions, and the employer contributions would also cease at that point. Previously, you've needed the approval, I believe, of the Commissioner for Inland Revenue or his or her delegated agent in order to cease your contributions to the KiwiSaver scheme. And what I'm wondering is, do these non-deduction notices remove that requirement? Can anybody just opt out of KiwiSaver whenever they feel like it? Or will they still need that that waiver, if you like, from the Commissioner of the Inland Revenue, because certainly that, Mr Chair,
Chris Hipkins.
certainly read on its own, that's what that section would suggest. But as I say, I haven't got the Principal Act in front of me to refer back to, because it may well be that there are sections in the Principal Act that I've missed that might actually cover that issue. The other parts in Part 5, there's some other interesting parts in Part 5, but particularly section on page 94, the unsuccessful software development provisions there. This section applies when a person incurs expenditure in the development of software for use in the person's business if the development of the software is abandoned before the software is fit to be used in the person's business. I think it's really important to note that government software development doesn't come in under this category here, because as we've seen in recent days and weeks, government aren't doing particularly well when it comes to software development and how they manage the information within departments. And I think maybe we do need to look at how we could incentivise government to up their game here. Obviously a tax deduction is a bit pointless because the money would go back to the government in the first place, but there's some merit to discussing better how we could get the government's software development and their IT project development sharpened up a little bit in light of recent announcements and recent debates that have had taken place in this House. There are some other interesting provisions in this section, spreading forward the deductions for the repairs of fishing boats. I have to say, interesting topic. I'm sure that the owners of the fishing boats will be very, very pleased with these amendments. So on that note, Mr Chairman, I basically would finally say that the Labour Party is supporting this bill because it contains many measures that we do support, and particularly I'm pleased. What about cabbage boats? my colleague David Clark, that's a good point actually. Will this amendment, there's a whole other 5 minutes that I've just thought of. Will this amendment to the repairs of fishing boats apply to cabbage boats that Mr Banks might be wanting to come into the country on? That's a very good question. I don't know the definition of the fishing boat. Is according to this, just glancing through it, a fishing boat is defined under the Fisheries Act of 1983. I don't know what the definition of a fishing boat is. I'm not sure whether John Banks's cabbage boats would necessarily come in under that, but I'm sure one of the other members of the opposition might, or the Minister and the Chair might be able to clear that up for us. He's nodding his head, so I'm feeling very optimistic. I think he's misleading me though, because I just get the sense that he's not going to take the next call and answer all of my questions, and I'm going to be bitterly disappointed by that, because I think that there are many issues to be cleared up, and particularly this new issue, this new revelation that has just arisen a few moments ago, that in fact John Banks's cabbage boat could be covered by this exemption or these requirements around certain repairs to fishing boats. That's a very interesting development, and I think one that would be very interesting to hear the Minister's feedback on. Finally, I was winding up before, and David Clark very kindly gave me some new material to work from. But finally, I think I just want to summarise by saying that the Labour Party supports this bill. We're very pleased with the KiwiSaver amendments in particular. We don't think that the government did the right thing in cutting the KiwiSaver contributions from 4% to 2%, particularly at a time when the government was saying we want New Zealanders to save more money. Their decisions around KiwiSaver certainly went in the opposite direction to that. So very pleased to see it going back to 3%, and the Labour Party will be supporting this piece of legislation.
Michael Woodhouse.
I move that the question be now put.
Andrew Williams.